I have a story for you. It's a fable, one you might have heard before. It takes place on a farm in the middle of the English countryside. The animals on the farm have come up with a plan. They're tired of pulling such heavy machines to plow such big fields. They're tired of losing their offspring, their puppies, their foals, their calves to greedy farmers or to the slaughterhouse. They're tired of hunger, of painful harnesses, of forced sterilization, of beatings. They're tired of having no say in their own existence, so they plan to overthrow the farmer who lords over them. The farm animals are big and strong, so it happens quickly, more quickly than any of the animals anticipate. Soon the pigs ascend as decision makers on the farms. It makes sense, mostly because the pigs are the smartest, after all. For a little while, this new life works. The animals work together. They live under a creed of equality and freedom. Soon, though, two pigs named Napoleon and Snowball emerge as competing leaders. They just can't agree. Snowball is more ideological and passionate. Napoleon is more conniving, more brutal. One day, Napoleon forces Snowball off the farm with attack dogs that he's brainwashed since birth. After that, things change. The farm begins to operate under a new, unyielding dogma. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. That's the premise of today's Velshi Band Book Club feature, one of the most salient political satires ever written, a true cultural touchstone. Animal Farm by George Orwell. The genius of Orwell's Animal Farm is the depth of the storytelling. At face value, Animal Farm is a beautifully written barnyard fable. A little deeper, an Animal Farm is an allegory, satire. What Animal Farm set out to illustrate is well known and well documented. Orwell's disdain for Joseph Stalin and his reproach of totalitarianism and England's wartime allegiance with Russia. Orwell, a dedicated democratic socialist, was a notorious critic of not just Stalin, but of all government overreach. In a 1946 essay entitled Why I Write, George Orwell explained, quote, Animal Farm was the first book in which I tried with full consciousness of what I was doing, to fuse political purpose and artistic purpose into one whole. Deeper still is the warning Animal Farm imparts for today's reader. You don't need to be fully aware of Stalin's brutalities to understand precisely what Animal Farm is telling you. Orwell's masterful command of language, his dynamic and complex anthropomorphic characters, and his well-placed plot are precision instruments that are used to warn the reader of the corrupting influence of power, of the danger of blind obedience, and the cyclical nature of politics. And that's what's most stirring in this novel. Political context that would have been obvious when the novella was initially published in 1945 is superfluous in some ways to the story itself. The reader doesn't need to fully grasp the violent struggle for dominance between Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin in Russia to react to the unjust death of animals and their struggle for equality and freedom. You don't need to know any of that to know that there are many things in this book that ring true in today's America. I don't usually spoil the ending of the work we cover on Velshi Band Book Club, but today I'm going to. Napoleon, after killing his most loyal worker and betraying his former friends, joins forces with the humans, the farmers, the very people that subjugated Napoleon and the farm animals for so long. Napoleon and the farmers sit around a table and drink and eat and celebrate a prosperous future for their farms. The other animals watch from outside the window. Quote, as the animals outside gazed at the scene, it seemed to them that some strange thing was happening. What was it that had altered in the faces of the pigs? Clover's old dim eyes flitted from one face to another. Some of them had 5 chins, some had 4, some had 3. 12 voices were shouting, and they were all alike, no question. Now, what had happened to the faces of the pigs? The creatures outside looked from pig to man and from man to pig and from pig to man again, but already it was impossible to say which was which, end quote. At the end of Orwell's Animal Farm, the government wins. The totalitarian government wins. After a short commercial break, I'm joined by Teja Albrecht, the award-winning author, an Animal Farm expert, and the writer of the foreword for Animal Farm's Anniversary Edition. All right, today's meeting of the Velshi Band Book Club is officially underway. We're covering an enduring classic, a work of fiction that is as critical today as it was when it was first written 80 years ago, Animal Farm by George Orwell. Here with me is Teja Albrecht. Teja is an Animal Farm expert, really. She wrote the foreword for the 75th Anniversary Edition. She teaches Animal Farm to high school students across the country. She's also the award-winning author of numerous books, including The Morning Side. Teja, welcome to the Velshi Band Book Club.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
This book. We were trying to convey the idea that doesn't matter if you don't know the background. It doesn't even matter if you're not living in America at this moment. Everybody who read Animal Farm generally got it the first time around. Why does this conceit work so well? Why do the animals work so well in this allegory?
Well, the animals themselves work well because it is a beast fable, right? And that's sort of how most children, at least in the West, are first introduced to narrative and introduced to narrative with a moral center. As you said in the introduction, Orwell was very, very explicit about his purpose in writing this book. He wanted it to be incredibly clear. He wanted to highlight the aspects of society that allow authoritarianism to thrive. Our fascination with strongmen, the weaponization of language, the revision of history, how silence makes us complicit in our own downfall. And one of the reasons that he wanted to do this was because he felt that his countrymen did not think that Stalin's brand of authoritarianism was something that could happen in the UK. Maybe it could happen in Russia, but it could never happen in the West. And the book is a warning, and it's a very clear warning in the simplest possible terms through animal fable. It can happen anywhere. Here's how.
You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot these days, even in today's specific news about a squabble that's been going on in the last week between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, goes back to one of the most famous quotes in Animal Farm, probably the most famous quote of Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. A truism through time.
Absolutely. And that quote, I mean, I think people know it even when they haven't read the book, and it shows the radical corruption of the original tenet, right? The original language, which is part of the 7 tenets of animalism that are established after the animals rebel against Farmer Jones, is all animals are equal. And so this revised stance, like so much of what the Boer Napoleon does, is a kind of sleight of hand. He's saying what he means. He's saying exactly what he means, that some animals, namely the pigs, will be privileged over others. But he's saying it using the language of the original tenet, using the language of freedom. And he's casting a kind of spell over Animal Farm in which the true history and the true purpose of the rebellion is being slowly erased.
Is this different right now than you would have taught this 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Does the relevance of the story move and evolve as our politics do?
I don't think, I mean, I think the scary thing about it, the jarring thing about it, is how relevant it remains in the exact same way. You know, it's a blueprint. It's a map of how those in power accrue more power, and how everyday people fall into the spell of strong men, and how good intentions in difficult times can be manipulated to clamp down on an entire society. And it's a blueprint for a reason. You know, I'm sure that Orwell, when he wrote this, didn't hopes that its existence would eliminate the need for it. You know what I mean? And we're not there at all.
No.
We have this book, and yet here we are. You know, we're still banning books. We're still talking about sanctioned and sanitized history. We still claim that we stand for the values of equality, while our society makes it abundantly clear every day, at home and abroad, that some animals are more equal than others.
Mm-hmm. Early in the planning of the rebellion in the book, one of the animals, Molly, was a white mare, asks what will become of her. The very first question she asked Snowball was, will there still be sugar after the rebellion? No, said Snowball firmly. We have no means of making sugar on this farm. Besides, you do not need sugar. You will have all the oats and hay you want. And shall I still be allowed to wear ribbons in my mane? Asked Molly. Comrade, said Snowball, those ribbons that you are so devoted to are the badge of slavery. Can you not understand that liberty is worth more than ribbons? Molly agreed, but she did not sound very convinced. Talk to me about that and how it applies to the modern day.
Well, Molly, after that exchange, you know, Molly doesn't last long on the new farm. She chooses to run away because she misses her sugar cubes and she misses her fancy ribbons. And through her, Orwell has the opportunity to comment on how creature comforts can come to mean more to us than our freedom or our morality. or our allegiance to our community. But he's also commenting on the fact that in every society, there are strata, right? And even in oppressive regimes, not everyone is equally oppressed. And that applies very much to the modern day. Even in an oppressive regime, some people get sugar cubes and some people get ribbons. You know, Molly, I feel, is the epitome of the we could all be at brunch point of view.
Is there when you teach this, is there an impetus for students to read this to associate it with their time? Because what you're talking about is the fact that it's sort of timeless. It's been relevant at every point in history since it was written.
Absolutely. And I think we talk very explicitly about that. You know, I live in the Mountain West and I talk to students in the Mountain West, and these tend to be rural schools where, you know, the book is taught to young people, usually to teenagers. It's usually taught in high school. And students will often ask, you know, I'm 15 years old and I live in Wyoming or I live in Idaho. How is this relevant to me? Like, what can I, even if I, have metabolized the information, what can I do with it? Even if it's timeless, what can I do with it? And I think the answer with this book and with all books really is allow it to ask the questions that it's asking you and then ask questions back, right? Like look up to the world, you know, look up into the world in which you're living, and check in with yourself and ask yourself some questions like, does this seem right? And where have I seen this before? And how did I come to think what I think? So I think in that way, too, it forces us to ask timeless questions of ourselves.
You have made a book that is sort of inherently interesting of itself, yet more interesting to us and our viewers, and we are grateful to you for that. Thea Albrecht is the newest member of the Welsh Evan Book Club. She's the award-winning author of numerous books, including The Morning Side.